An article about poetry. I imagine, somewhere far away, perhaps tonight a small group of people will sit together in a classroom to discuss communicating in English, in some language other than English. I imagine they'll instinctively know the rules of their own native tongue and desperately try to understand English as if it were their own language, with a different vocabulary, a different grammar. Every time they hear an English phrase, inevitably they will pause amongst themselves and discuss exactly how they would say this in their language and how much easier it would be. Eventually, if they are patient, a few will learn to have a conversation in English, at least well enough to visit London or New York, order a meal, ask for directions to a toilet, and maybe even pick up the cutie at the bar. Some few of them will learn to read in English, somehow struggling through the strange alphabet to suss out meaning from long strings of words that even natural speakers seldom speak. Eventually, if they work really hard, one or two will learn to understand stories written in English, at least well enough to peruse headlines and find an interesting article to waste time on a plane. I imagine this will happen. This will happen even tonight, with the end of the world upon us, and billions of souls searching for hope. Maybe especially tonight, with the end of the world upon us. Sadly, one of them will be inexorably drawn to poetry, and ask the simple-seeming question poets despise, and everyone else rolls their eyes vigorously over. What are the rules of grammar in English poetry? If they ask me, I will most likely laugh in their face, and explain that the rules of grammar are the rules, whether in prose or in poetry. There is only one difference. Poets break the rules. Languages, I will tell them, all have nouns, words for things. Languages all have verbs, I will tell them, words for actions. Perhaps they'll nod, perhaps they won't. And then I'll say, all languages have meaning. In that way, whatever language they speak, and English, will be no different. However you wish to write it, or share it, English is English, poetry or prose. Poetry, I might suggest because I'm a poet, is simply language less bound to obedience to the rules. Then it'll happen. It's really unavoidable. The devil will arrive, whether we believe or not. The problem of good and evil is ever present in these ridiculous discussions of language. The noun's the thing, some smart student will say tonight, and I will correct, well, more a thing than the thing. Their eyes will glaze over because in some languages, perhaps theirs, there are no articles at all, and thus begins the truth. No matter how well a verb might describe what a thing does, what a thing might do, what a thing did in the past, the thing might be entirely unwilling to be so bound. And no matter how well an adjective might describe the noun, without exception, there will be an exception, the exception to the rule, or an exception that defies description. The verbs might leave them tense, but the articles will confuse and bewilder. Why even have an article? The article does nothing that couldn't be done some other way, they say. This is when I am sure compassion will overcome me. It's true, I'll admit. Sometimes an article is completely unnecessary. But sometimes the article makes all the difference in the world. Then I'll sadly nod my head. I will look at a pretty young lady. You You are a woman. She will nod. A woman robbed the bank. She will look confused. Are you the woman who robbed the bank? I will look at an older gentleman. You own a car. A Mercedes is a car. You must own a Mercedes. The old man will roll his eyes, understanding that this is logically false. Confusion will reign. Confusion will reign. I imagine 1,000 students. I imagine the students in that classroom. A thing is a thing, but the thing is only the thing. The thing is the one and only thing that fits. A thing is any old thing that fits. I wait for questions, aware that I am a poet. I write this poem and I break another rule and offer them an answer that isn't necessarily the answer to their question.